This podcast may contain explicit language. It's good to be the king. History of the World, Part 1, is next. Welcome to the Greatest Movie of All Time podcast, the show that uses a unique grading style to redefine what the greatest movies are. I'm Tom Duncan.
And I am Dana Duncan, who has this silly French accent. He cannot even afford his own language. He has to sound like Maurice Chevalier.
Well, you caught it there about midstream. For the first part of it, I wasn't sure what you were doing. It sounded like you were repressing a fart or something.
Okay.
I'm glad it wasn't just me, because he started on it, and it sounded like a bad Natasha impression at first.
Well, he's not going to be Natasha. He's going to be Boris. Although, to be fair, I'm probably more Boris at this point. You're Natasha, and, well, he's fearless leader. Tonight, for our 315th episode, we discuss History of the World Part 1 from 1981, celebrating its 45th anniversary. Written and directed by Mel Brooks, cinematography by Woody Omens, music by John Morris, editing by John C. Howard, starring Mel Brooks as Moses Comicus Torquemada, Jacques and King Louis XVI, Dom DeLuise as Emperor Nero, Madeline Kahn as Empress Nympho, Harvey Korman as Count de Money, Cloris Leachman as Madame Defarge.
Monet.
Sure. Ron Carey as Swiftus, Gregory Hines as Josephus, Pamela Stevenson as Mademoiselle Rimbaud, Shecky Green as Marcus Vindictus, Sid Caesar as Chief Caveman, Sammy Shore as Prehistoric Man, Mary Margaret Humes as Miriam, and Orson Welles as the narrator. Background for the movie: History of the World Part 1 was released on June 12, 1981. On a budget of $10 million, the film would go on to gross roughly $31.6 million and finish number 20 at the worldwide box office for 1981. Critics were mostly negative at the time of the release, and some even since. It was nominated for Worst Picture at the 1981 Stinkers Bad Movie Awards, but lost to Tarzan the Ape Man. The revised ballot, released in 2007, removed its Worst Picture nomination and instead nominated it for Most Painfully Unfunny Comedy, which it won. It also garnered a Worst Song nomination at the same ceremony for The Inquisition, lost to Baby Talk from Paternity. Unfortunately, despite its box office, the film was also largely considered a commercial flop. On October 18th, 2021, Hulu and Searchlight Television, the TV division of 20th Century's sister studio Searchlight Pictures, announced that a sequel variety series called History of the World Part 2 was in the works, with production beginning in spring of 2022. Mel Brooks produced and wrote the series along with Wanda Sykes, Ike Barinholtz, and Nick Kroll, who also star in the show. It premiered on March 6th, 2023. I have yet to watch it.
I have. It's okay.
Okay. History of the World Part 1 currently holds a 62% among critics on Rotten Tomatoes, a 47 score on Metacritic, and a 3.3 out of 5 on Letterboxd. But as always, we can't do this by ourselves, so we bring in our returning celebrity guest, a 5-time club member making her 11th appearance on the show to date. It's the pint-sized professor of past antiquities only she cares about. Please welcome back Sarah Duncan.
It's absolutely great to be back. I'm not sure I'd necessarily call myself a celebrity. Maybe just to you, Thomas. I know I'm pretty amazing. And I'm sorry, but having just spent 3 weeks in Greece, I can tell you for certain that I'm not the only person who cares about these antiquities.
Okay.
How many times during those 3 weeks did you say, well, actually?
You'd have to ask John. He did ask me to lead him on a tour through the Knossos Palace, so...
Just tallying up the potential times here. I'm going to say over under 47.
But there's
Well,
no way it's that.
there is a reason why you were the family Cliff Clavin.
To be fair, she's doing it to impress you, because that really all comes from you. And
Yeah.
the anecdotal stuff that you just have to drop in at a moment's notice, that's what you've become on this show, and she's just trying to get your attention. So will you do it, please?
Necessarily get your attention, but I do know, or I do emulate what I am shown as a child.
I mean, where? No, I can't do that joke. I'm sorry, that's way too family inside baseball, and this is a public forum, so no.
The
I
dictionary
can't.
of useless knowledge.
No, that was not where I was gonna go.
Yeah.
There are too many things as children that probably should just stay there.
Yeah.
Okay,
Maybe.
moving on. Tonight we're discussing History of the World Part 1. Dad, you are obviously the resident Mel Brooks fan on the show. Not that either of us is, like, not a fan, but you tend to be the one that goes over the moon, that introduced us to him. And our relationship to all Mel Brooks material is through you. So I'm just going to give you the floor. What is your relationship to this movie particularly?
This is a movie that came out in, I think it was 1980. And I saw it at the theater, and then I think I watched it 3 or 4 times on HBO when it was making its round after the release. And it's a movie that I've, as you're well aware, the number of times I've quoted from this movie through the years is probably numbing.
I think that I knew more of the jokes before I'd watched it than just about any other movie. I had seen it one other time before this week, which was in college. I think I had the DVD of it for some reason. I can't remember how I got it or what the circumstances were, but I got the physical copy, and I watched it one time, and I'm like, okay.
It has its moments, it has its lines. It is not his best movie.
It's a little more disjointed. I mean, to be fair, I had my issues with all Mel Brooks movies the first time through. It's taken me several viewings to kind of get the humor, I guess. The first time when they blow through the set on Blazing Saddles and break that fourth wall, just shatter it, I'm like, what the fuck is going on? Why the hell are there dancers here doing the can-can? What does that have to do with a Western? This entire movie makes no sense.
The movie is fantastic.
It's just one of the limited versions of comedy. It's absurdity.
Sure. But Sarah, had you seen this movie before this week?
I haven't seen it, but I've been hearing you guys quote it for a decade and a half, at least. So this is definitely one when I saw it come up on the list. I was like, oh yeah, I'll do that. Gives me an excuse to actually sit down and watch it for once.
So one of the things that I often focus on when we discuss comedies on this show, which we try to do a little bit more of than the average show that focuses on great movies, particularly because comedies are often given a short shrift when it comes to that, is how well the comedy ages. I maintain that realistically, you can remake comedies all the time because you can just take the premise, which probably is golden, and just update the jokes, because comedy is so subjective and it has such an age palpability that, for example, and I know we've talked about it on this show, but going back and watching like the first season of Saturday Night Live, I was just like, this is not funny. This doesn't make any sense. Why do people think this was funny? Or listening to old Bob Hope. It's so stark in comparison to what makes me laugh. Now, to be fair, I have already referred to myself many, many times on this program as being the comedy snob. But one of the things that we've found in a lot of comedies that we've covered for this show is that they've aged relatively well. What is your thoughts here on this specific movie? Has the comedy aged well? Does it still make you laugh?
One of the ways that comedies do not age is when they're doing word plays and such. I mean, you could do the whole thing from Blazing Saddles with everybody in town being named Johnson and the Howard Johnson and all. Okay, that's going to be funny or something like that forever because it just doesn't go out of style necessarily. It's one of the reasons why the Marx Brothers still hold up so well, because it's an intellectually based humor. There are certain jokes of this that I think hold out. Dropping the 15 commandments, it holds up. All right? Some of it doesn't. But again, a lot of times humor and what makes humor great is when it's cutting edge, when it goes to a different place than where most comedy is going at that particular time. And this kind of, I think this was the last gasp of the exact type of humor Brooks did. He had to go more modern with Spaceballs. Even Men in Tights wasn't as good because I think it was a little bit too beholden on traditional tropes.
Some of the wordplay works, but the disjointed nature of some of this feels like there's no central narrative and it's just a bunch of cut up scenes for setup gags. We spend maybe a little bit too long in certain periods of time, like tacking on the Last Supper to the Roman era for some reason just kind of lost me at the end of it. I don't know. There are pieces of this where I wonder if satire that is specifically aimed at something in the immediate context, in this case, epics or historical epics. This was riffing on the historical epics that most people were at least in some knowledge of at the time. Your Ben-Hurs, your Lawrences of Arabia, your Ten Commandments, those types of movies from the 50s and 60s that we don't really have the context for anymore. And frankly, even this movie may have been too far out to really be commenting on those movies specifically, going from 1981 to back to the late 50s, early 60s.
Well, I think in part, one of the things that it may have happened, and I don't know this for certain, is that Brooks was trying to write some sort of spoof of the historical epic, and he had a couple of different parts, and nothing seemed to be working. So he decided, well, hey, let's just do it history of the world, and I'll just knit them together and call it a movie.
Well, also specifically, he's riffing on 2001: A Space Odyssey from 14 years prior in the opening sequence. But I was so frickin' bored, kind of in the same way that I am in 2001, with the opening sequence. And he spent way too long letting Sid Caesar basically club guys to death.
Yeah. A large part of this film was Brooks bringing all of his old buddies from the Borscht Belt out to appear. I mean, the number of people, I just kept sitting there going, oh yeah, Henny Youngman, Jan Murray. I just kept rattling off names of comedians from the 60s and 70s that were on here.
Okay, what do you mean, the Borscht Belt? I've never heard this term.
After World War II, New York Jews specifically, to escape the heat, would go up into the Adirondacks, into these clubs that catered to Jewish people. And they would have entertainment and comedians and such. And a lot of the comedians, such as Mel Brooks, Sid Caesar, Howard Morris, who was on the show with them. I'm trying to remember all of them that were doing
You don't need to.
But they would do these comedy routines and go from camp to camp to camp. And it was an actual thing where they would cycle around. You'd be there for a week, then you'd go to the next one for a week, and then you'd be the next one for a week, and you do that all summer. And it was referred to as by all the Jewish comedians that were there as the Borscht Belt.
I thought it was borscht with a T.
Well, I'm not exactly sure. I've heard it borscht and I've heard it borscht.
Depends on your pronunciation and your accent. Dialects.
Well, actually.
Hey, I didn't say it!
In her ever-loving quest to try and be the Neil deGrasse Tyson of this program. Okay. Moving on. Sarah, did the movie make you laugh?
Yes, but I found it interesting because I watched it at home with Dad, or at least all but the last, 10 minutes. And I was laughing at very different parts than he was. So
Such
that
as?
was... well, I was laughing at the markets in particular. That's, one of my favorite things, especially the market in Rome, where they're selling the columns. I particularly found that kind of funny, especially knowing the historic time frame on the... And they're actually listing off the Doric versus iconic pillars. And then the piping in ancient Rome. Pipe the crap out of your house. And Dad was laughing at different parts, especially Caesar's palace. So it was just interesting to see too, him being more familiar with the movie. Just still finding those differences, I think, in what I consider funny now versus him.
One of the things that I know that we've commented on recently, given that I think it was 2 weeks ago, we talked about FX releasing a new series on Young Frankenstein, or a prequel series or something to that effect. And we had a History of the World Part 2. We're having a Spaceballs 2. We have a musical that Mel Brooks put together recently. That there's, I don't want to say a renaissance, but a coming together, or I guess an appreciation of Mel again in this recent history, or this decade, basically, that we've come back around and said, oh, well, there's really nobody like Mel. I don't know who else is making comedies like this. He seems to have been basically the only one, save for the few weird mashup comedies that we got in the late 90s, early 2000s with the scary movie types. And then we had Epic Movie and Movie 43, which were crap, but they were trying to riff on specific genres. And outside of that, there's really nobody like this that is making these types of comedies.
No. There are very few comedians who are truly unique. And Bob Newhart, when he first came out, was completely different than every other comedian. Steve Martin, when he first started, was completely different than every other comedian.
Richard Pryor.
And they set a tendency. And the movies you named that were, the movies from the 80s and 90s, where they were taking on... Those were originated out of Mel Brooks taking on genres, the West, the horror movie, the silent movie, the psychological thriller from High Anxiety, etc. That's where they originated. So Mel is directly responsible for that whole genre.
I understand. That's what I'm trying to say, is there are very few imitators, and most of them have not been very good. Although, to be fair, with me, some of Mel's movies are very hit or miss. There are the really great classics, your Young Frankensteins, your Blazing Saddles, your Producers, and then there are movies that I have less of a reverence for, Silent Movie or High Anxiety.
Well, the comedy teams, other than, I'm trying to think, we had the Marx Brothers, we had Abbott and Costello, we had Martin and Lewis, we had Mel Brooks. Those are the only ones I could think of that really created a genre of comedies that had staying power and kind of altered or changed how things were done.
I think there have been eras of comedy, but they're very crafted into a specific space. So you had your frat comedies of the late 70s, early to mid 80s. That'll include Porky's, Animal House, Revenge of the Nerds, those types of things. You had your romantic comedies from the late 80s into the 90s. Those were the Meg Ryan, Sandra Bullock-y type movies. Then you had your 2000s gross out humor, R-rated comedy boom that kind of ended around The Hangover maybe a couple of years later with like a This Is the End kind of thing. And each era kind of has its own cycle of stuff. I don't think we've found what the comedy genre is right now. I think part of it is the accessibility, particularly on Netflix and streaming and some of these other things, for actual stand-up comedy as opposed to the movies. But I also figure that there's nobody like a Mel Brooks who, while he could have done stand-up comedy and did it at various different times, it was usually through a sketch or a routine or something else. We just don't have somebody that is making movies like this. He is unique to himself. We're not even getting the feeder system like we had with SNL with Adam Sandler and Will Ferrell from the mid-90s through the mid-2000s or late 2000s as a feeder system. We don't have the Apatow guys really making that anymore. They're, if anything, on TV. Evidence of Jason Segel here with Shrinking. But Mel was always a movies guy. His shtick worked specific to movies, and I just don't see who is the guy that's going to step forward to fill this gap right now.
Well, the only other one that I would point to is we had Zucker and Abrams, who did the Airplane movie and then the Naked Gun films. But they both went on different directions, or all three of them went in different directions, and they're all older and really aren't doing anything, which is why we had the remake being done by, why am I drawing a blank, from Family Guy?
Seth MacFarlane.
Seth MacFarlane doing it, because it's an homage to them, because it followed the same type of comedy, but there just isn't anybody doing it.
Well, the most recent version, I guess you could say, of somebody close to this is probably MacFarlane with either the Ted movies, I guess, which is now a TV show. And he also did that Million Ways to Die in the West, which was kind of Mel Brooksy, Zucker and Abraham light. Kind of was in those same vein. And I mean, I found at least the original Ted. I don't remember watching Ted 2 and A Million Ways to Die in the West, at least entertaining. But he's got so much invested in TV at this point that I just, I don't know. And even TV sitcoms right now is kind of going through some turmoil.
I know. You can tell, though, when you watch something, if you really stop and pay attention of who the influence was of the comedians in television, movies, etc. And I can guarantee that a lot of these, and one of the reasons why we're having this renaissance of Mel has been that a lot of the kids who grew up watching these movies are now in their 40s and have the ability to actually start producing and starring and directing their own movies. And so they go back to him as being kind of the inspiration.
No, I know that's most definitely true because Nick Kroll specifically called and got permission to start talking about History of the World Part 2. And I know Josh Gad went to him about a Spaceballs 2. So you're very much correct on that front. But let's narrow our discussion here and move into the movie itself, History of the World Part 1. Do you have our plot summary ready for us?
I do. History of the World Part 1 is a wild comedy that makes fun of famous moments in world history. Mel Brooks plays several different characters as the movie jumps from the Stone Age to the Roman Empire and the French Revolution. Through songs, jokes, and ridiculous situations, the movie pokes fun at politics, religion, and human behavior. Its fast-moving style and silly humor have made it a cult comedy favorite.
Thank you, Dad. So what is the film about?
I don't know if it's about anything. I think it more than anything tries to point out some of the absurdities in history. Okay, I know that people were, kind of, but the Spanish Inquisition was all about conversion of Jews, and Mel consistently tries to make fun of that whole situation because he thinks that humor kind of destroys the ability to be anti-Semitic. It makes them look ridiculous.
This is the number one complaint I have about this movie. I don't think it's about anything. I think it's about a lot of things, and none of them seem to run similarly together that you could create a through line, other than the fact that they're just scenes from random historical periods. I think individually, taken by themselves in moments, as you said, that they can be entertaining or funny. The Inquisition scene I found to be entertaining, although maybe not quite as funny as some other spots, and it has its own individualized jokes. But none of these are like a commentary on the same type of societal ill or anything else. And so unlike Blazing Saddles, which was very much about poking fun at racism in Westerns, this movie just doesn't quite have the same notion.
I think that each time period has something to kind of say, but I think you're right that none of them have like a correlation to each other. But each period in of itself, there is something specific that you can kind of feel he's trying to talk about or get his point across. Whether that's, the ridiculousness of politics and politicians and what you can and can't say in front of certain people in Rome, or just kind of making fun of the idea of, obviously, to point back at the Inquisition, it's an era of time that's dictated by fear and racism, and he's trying to just make it into this grand affair, is kind of just laughing at the absurdity of it all. And I think that's exactly what he's trying to do with the cavemen scenes too. And also, there's also something in there about, how we all have the same innate need to try to explore and discover things in a very odd way at times. And I think that's, the whole music scene is just trying to poke fun at the ridiculousness of what, even amongst historians or archaeologists and people, assume early humans were like.
The way this movie feels to me, it's very reminiscent of my similar complaints with The Meaning of Life. It just feels like a conglomeration of scenes that they wrote individually and were on the cutting room floor or something and figured out, well, let's just put this all together.
So you're telling me you're not a fan of The Meaning of Life?
Individual moments, yes. The movie in total, no.
That's exactly how The Meaning of Life was going. They each were paired up in comedy teams writing, and they couldn't agree on anything. And Michael Palin took the scripts upstairs, and he came down at breakfast and he said, "This is what the movie is about." And he came up with the whole thing of the meaning of life and tied them all together. And that's how it happened, because otherwise that movie would have fallen apart completely. This is a situation, if you had to ask me what this movie is about, in part, I think it's just Mel trying to find a way to get all of his old friends around him so that he could have a good time filming it and they could get a paycheck. It wasn't like Sid Caesar was doing a lot in 1981, or like Jan Murray was a hot commodity, or Henny Youngman.
If that's the case, then it very much feels like this Netflix era of Adam Sandler.
Yeah.
With the Grown Ups 3 coming out again, or coming out next. I can tell Dad's excited.
Did you know? Beforehand, it was agreed that Orson Welles would receive $5,000 per day in exchange for his services. Figuring that he'd have to spend 5 8-hour days recording and re-recording these lines with Welles, Mel Brooks paid him $25,000 up front. But by noon on the first day, Welles had recorded his lines to perfection. Quote, "Oh my God, I could have paid you $5,000, Brooks lamented. After kicking himself for a few minutes, the funny man asked Welles how he planned to spend the bounty. Cuban cigars and Sevruga caviar, Welles replied.
That sounds like Orson by that point in time.
Yeah. Did you know? According to Mel Brooks, the Moses scene was a last-minute addition. Quote, "Sometimes you will get very lucky and the set will give you ideas for jokes," Brooks said in a 2012 interview with the Directors Guild of America. One day, he was gazing out at the scenery that had been built for the caveman segments when the gears in his head started turning. Quote, "I immediately thought, well, where do I go from here? He recalled, heading into the shoot, his plan was to skip the Bible and go to Rome, but eventually he realized that the Stone Age set might enable him to explore another chapter in world history. With a few minor alterations, Brooks converted his fake caves into a mountaintop, and the Moses bit was born.
Interesting.
Did you know? In the Old Testament segment, the writing on the tablets are the correct two-word Hebrew version of the commandments. Don't kill, don't steal, don't lie, etc. The 5 more don'ts on the third tablet that Moses accidentally drops are: don't impregnate, don't laugh, don't buy, and the last one, don't break. Did you know? Richard Pryor was originally cast in 2 Mel Brooks movies but had to be replaced. With Blazing Saddles from 1974, Brooks was unable to secure financing for the film due to Pryor's controversial reputation, leading him to being replaced by Cleavon Little. Pryor was also originally cast in this movie, but his infamous drug-related accident, catching fire, getting severely burned, occurring just before the filming began, led to Gregory Hines making his film debut as Pryor's replacement.
Yeah. Gregory Hines lost him way too early.
Did you know? Mel Brooks claimed that the budget, an estimated $11 million, exceeded that of his previous 3 films combined. Particularly expensive was the Inquisition scene, in which the set cost $1 million. By comparison, the entire budget of the producers was $941,000. And finally, did you know? During the Jews in Space sequence, the camera moves through the center of the Star of David-shaped spaceships, and some Hebrew letters are visible on the interior wall just under the guns. The word these letters spell is kosher.
Oh.
And so with that, we will take our first break, and we'll be right back. Before we jump back into the episode, next week for our 316th episode, we discuss Ace in the Hole from 1951, celebrating its 75th anniversary. Written and directed by Billy Wilder with Lesser Samuels and Walter Newman, cinematography by Charles Lang, music by Hugo Friedhofer, editing by Doane Harrison and Arthur P. Schmidt, starring Kirk Douglas, Jan Sterling, Robert Arthur, and Porter Hall. You won't want to miss that one, so watch ahead of the show by searching the Real Good app to find where it's streaming for you. That's REELGOOD. Before we get much further, let's check in with our guest. Sarah, what are you working on, and where can people find you?
Currently, I am still working away on my paper for publication. And as always, can find me on my Instagram at The Nomadic Archaeologist.
And as always, our guest links will be available in both the show notes and on the website. Moving forward, we left off at Best Performance. Who does everybody have down? Well, this is going to be a rather obvious one. Mel?
I actually have Gregory Hines.
That's my best secondary, but okay. Go ahead. Be the outlier.
I thought he was charming, he was funny, he definitely grabs the attention of the viewer easily, and he was just fun to watch.
Okay, Dad, why is it Mel?
Writing, directing, starring, singing, composing. It's his vehicle.
It's the totality of everything. He's in just about every major scene in the movie. He's the through line, with the exception of, I guess, the caveman sequence where he's not really in it at all, but everything else flows through him. It's his creative genius. He's the writer. He's the director. It's a totality award. I mean, I wasn't going to even really entertain anybody else. Gregory Hines is my best secondary performance because I agree with Sarah on most of her points that he was a welcome addition to the film. As a starring debut, he had a lot to do. I felt that he was charismatic. He's just a fun character to have in there. And frankly, I didn't find a lot of the side characters to be all that impressive, but I'll nominate another one when we get to charismatic in a moment.
For me, my secondary performance, Cloris Leachman. Simply because I just love Cloris Leachman. And anytime she can do some sort of bizarre character, she does, and she Just always hits it out of the park.
With a facial disfigurement.
Yes.
We're waiting.
Sorry, I had Harvey Korman. I thought he was amusing, always had a sense of humor about him and slight arrogance and annoyance that definitely fit the French time frame. And he was just kind of a fun element to screen.
Honestly, he is my most charismatic. And in recognition of the fact that he's probably the lone cameo side character that comes in and swings for the fences and hits it, as far as I'm concerned, like, he was by far the funniest side character in my opinion. It has me re-examining whether I should have given him more kudos on Blazing Saddles as... Oh, why am I drawing a blank? Headley.
Eddie Lamar.
Headley.
And Methodist.
Yes.
Other most charismatics? Why are you hitching? Somebody go.
She keeps opening her mouth. I think she's going to say something, and then nothing.
We're gonna say something.
Somebody fucking talk. It's a podcast.
Okay. I have Madeline Kahn. Simply because it's a Lifetime Achievement Award as far as I'm concerned. Because she's been playing the same slut character for multiple Mel Brooks films. I just always enjoyed Madeline Kahn, and again, lost her way too early to cancer.
I
Sarah.
also wanted to nominate Gregory Hines as Josephus. I thought it was amusing, his part, especially the ending where he pops up out of nowhere from the Roman Empire, and he does it with humor, and he's willing to play along with whatever crap gets tossed his way, and I don't know, he was one of my favorite characters to watch in this film.
I'm just going to have to keep it in, all of the stuff, the side moments with her pausing, and... Because otherwise it's not going to make any fucking sense. You have never been one to be lost to not talk, except apparently when it's your fucking turn on this show. Okay, best scene. I have 5 nominees here. I have Josephus, which is the first appearance of Gregory Hines' character. Then I have Caesar's Palace, and most specifically when Mel is doing his stand-up philosopher routine. Then I have The Last Supper, I have The Inquisition, and I have Guillotine, which is the final moments of the film. Out of these, did you have any others to add?
Moses.
Okay. And Moses said unto him. All right. Anything else?
I think you've got it covered.
Hearing none. Out of these, what is the best scene?
I have Caesar's Palace. I just find that's probably the best portion of the film as far as writing and what takes place. Dom DeLuise is just a classic Caesar, and yeah. So to me, that's by far the best scene.
The highest production value level, the most simply entertaining of any one of these scenes. And while I don't think it is necessarily the funniest, it's just the best well-crafted version of any one of these. I'm going to give a clean sweep to The Inquisition.
Well, that is one of my favorite scenes, despite the fact that we're not there yet. But I think for best scene, I would actually go with that final scene where the mob is coming up to the palace and the guillotine. You get some good moments and jokes, and it kind of does attempt to wrap up the multiple storylines into some semblance of a thing at the end there. Trying to make sense of it all, at least.
Moving to favorite scene, as I said, I have a clean sweep on the Inquisition, partially also because I can't sing the entire song during Best Funniest Lines.
Yeah. I have the Inquisition as my favorite scene.
I have the Inquisition and coming soon History of the World Part 2 at the very, very end.
It's not Jews in space?
Jews in Space is part of that. Jews in Space was... I was laughing so hard. It's...
Where else have you heard that line but changed?
What?
Did either of you ever watch the Muppet Show?
Yes, Pigs in Space.
Pigs in Space. It steals it.
Was also laughing at the riff on Star Wars in there and the scrawling text at that very, very end.
I'm pretty sure Jews in Space steals from something else, which is what Pigs in Space was actually stealing from. But I don't know what the source material might be. Most indelible moment. I already said mine. Go ahead.
Sarah?
Mine. I thought you were going first. Okay, sorry. I, for mine, have the market scenes where it's, pipe the crap out of your house. And I also love the market stall guy in the French Revolution who's literally selling nothing. And then my secondary is, of course, Jews in Space. I'm sorry, I'm not gonna forget that anytime soon.
Mine is Moses, which is why I wanted it included, because that's always the scene I always remember, was the dropping of the 5 commandments.
All right, so that looks like a good spot for our second break. We'll be right back. The Inquisition, let's begin. The Inquisition, look out, sin. We have a mission to convert the Jews. We're gonna teach them wrong from right. We're gonna help them see the light and make an offer that they can't refuse. Before we jump back into the episode, and before we get to the Stanley Rubric in a minute, if you're ever curious about our Master Greatest Movies of All Time list that has every graded movie we've ever discussed on the show, there's a link in the episode description of every episode of this show, or you can go to RonnieDuncanStudios.com and find it as the top entry on the Greatest Movie of All Time podcast show page. That has the grades we've done so far for all 284 movies we've graded, and we continue to add more each week. Make sure to check that out as we go and follow along. Dad, do we have anyone to remember this week?
Yes. Grizz Chapman, 52, American actor, 30 Rock. Jeffrey Lane, 71, American television writer, Ryan's Hope, Mad About You, and playwright, Dirty Rotten Scoundrels.
And so we remember these here fondly for their contributions with a moment of silence in their honor. Thank you. Let's move to best funniest lines. I have Moses. The Lord Jehovah hath given unto you these 15, drops one of the tablets. Oi, 10 commandments for all to obey.
Leader of the Senate. All fellow members of the Roman Senate, hear me. Shall we continue to build palace after palace for the rich? Or shall we aspire to a more noble purpose and build decent housing for the poor? How does the Senate vote? Entire Senate. Fuck the poor.
Oedipus. Give to Oedipus. Give to Oedipus. Hey, Josephus. Hey, motherfucker.
Also, it's Josephus, but whatever. Dole office clerk. Occupation? Comicus. Stand-up philosopher.
Count de Monet. Don't get saucy with me, Bernays.
Sarah.
Madame Defarge, we are so poor we do not even have a language. Just this stupid accent.
Empress Nympho. Oh, Bob, do I have any openings that this man might fit?
Comicus. Boy, when you die at the palace, you really die at the palace.
Comicus, have you ever heard of this new sect, the Christians? They are a laugh riot. First of all, they are so poor. How poor are they? Thank you. They are so poor that they only have one god.
King Louis XVI. It's good to be the king.
Chemist. What are you looking for? Marcus Vindicus. A pack of Trojans. Chemist. Gee, I just ran out.
Count de Monet, your majesty, you look like the piss boy. King Louis the 16th, and you look like a bucket of shit.
Count to money. It is said that the people are revolting, King Louis XVI. You said it. They stink on ice.
Insolent flunky. Count de money. Count de Monet. De Monet. Say it. Monet. Say it with me. Monet.
King Louis the 16th, knight jumps queen, bishop jumps queen, pawns jump queen. And I can't believe I'm going to say this. Gangbang!
You picked to say it. You could have just as easily not.
It was funny.
Definitely needs to be a social media clip.
Great.
Let's move to the Stanley rubric. Legacy's up first. This is a measure of the legacy of the film approximately 5 years after it came out, so 1986 to today. What is the legacy of this film as shared between two equal yet separate groups? The industry for 5 points and the audience for 5 points for a total of 10. Dad, would you like to go first or second?
I will go first. For the industry, I have a 3. I would have given this a pretty middling for the industry because there were positive and negative reviews and critics at the time, and it kind of continued on for a number of years. But the fact that this has had such a rise among comedians of a certain age right now, the fact that they did the History of the World Part 2 gives it more credence, so I'm at a 3. For the public, this film, there's, office poll, still third of our staff knew the film or were aware of it. Yeah, there was the more older people in the office who knew it.
How can you tell?
Well, yeah, okay. Anyway, so industry is a 3. Public, again, I'm, a third of the people, 3, I guess, so I'm at a 6 total.
I agree with you on the public. I guess it has more resonance with people that we anecdotally know than I thought, but it's still not a film other than, well, it's hard to quantify, but I ended up at a 3 as well. As far as the industry, though, this is where I'll slightly diverge from you. I'm going to give this a 4 because this is apparently more important with comedians writ large than we thought. That their reverence for Mel Brooks as a performer and as an artist and an entertainer is a higher degree than I guess I gave it credit for. And so all of his media and art and movies are a much bigger deal. And by that extension, the fact that they came to him and this is the project that they first wanted a sequel to, I think partly because it's a part 1, and so it obviously makes itself, just based on the title, into a second part. But because of that, I'm going to give it a 4, so I'm at a 7.
And I think that much the same way that you said, there is a large significance with the industry. I do think that there are more people that know this than I actually thought there would be. People that I personally know who don't know any films to begin with that I talk about. And for all of that, as well as some of the significance in the just zeitgeist, I gave this a 6.5.
And that will be the average between the three of us, a 6.5. Moving to impact and significance, similar to the last category, we take the industry and the audience as a whole, 5 and 5 points apiece, but this time apply it to the initial 5 years after its release, 1981 to 1986, roughly. What is the impact and significance among those two groups? Because Dad led off the last category, I will take this first. On this, I think I'm going to end up with a 5. Part of it is that the industry at the time did not have a high level of reverence for the film. It was cut down by most of the critics. It was seen as a commercial flop and I'm trying to think of the right word, but retribution's not right, but a recompense? That's not even right, but on Mel Brooks. A reconsideration, maybe, of his work and whether he was staying up to date with the times. But I'll give it a 3 on the public because at least initially they were very willing to give Mel Brooks a chance based on the success of some of his other films. And as a result, it at least had an initially decent box office, even if it petered out quicker than most of his other films just due to its incoherent narrative. And so I end up at a 5.
Industry, I had 2.5 being about middle of the road for the critics and such. It had not gained its traction among the public as time went by. The public, made money, but it wasn't, a big hit. Not nearly as much as the previous ones. So I'm at a 3 for the public. I'm at a 5.5 overall.
I'm at a 4 overall. I think for how much money was spent on this film, it really didn't make a lot. I understand that Tom has talked about the fact that it was still in the top 20 grossing for its year, but I think that's partially due to the fact that, this was a Mel Brooks film. And I really don't think it was a flop with people and within the industry, at least at first. And it took a while for it to kind of come back around, which kind of missed out on this impact part of this film. So for that, I gave it a 4 total.
So then that is a 5 average between the three of us. Let's move to novelty. This is a measure of anything original having to do with the film for 5 points, and the execution on the film for an additional 5 points for a total of 10. Since Dad normally goes first on the next category, I will additionally take this one first. I will say I believe that the film has a certain level of unicorn quality to it. Even amongst Mel Brooks films, there really isn't any type of sketch comedy film quite like this. There are very infrequent musical numbers, but not quite to the level where it's this choreographed into a very finite section of the film. This is probably his least narratively consistent film throughout. And so among his own films, I would say it's somewhat of a standout from that standpoint as well. So I have that at a 4, but I'll just be honest, the execution on this is not good for me. I don't think that the jokes work nearly as well. I think it's disjointed, destructured. Some of the stuff in here is just utterly boring to me. And so as a result, I have that at a 2. I can't go too much lower than that because there are pieces of this movie that still work in total, but there are too many things that I have that knock it down to a 2, and I have a 6 here.
All right. I agree on the originality. I'm at a 4. I think it is unique. I don't remember any sketch comedy films before other than Monty Python, but that even or was either contemporaneous with this. But I will say that execution, I think that it was done a little better than what you're claiming or what you think. I'm at a 3. It's not Mel's best, but I think the timing is pretty decent. I think that there were some jokes that held up, and I'm going to give it a 3, so I'm at a 7 overall.
I agree with a lot of what you said. The originality is great. I actually gave it a 4 for originality. I don't think really even now we're seeing anything in this style. And frankly, I'd like to see more in this style. It's quite fun. But beyond that, I think the execution is better than, frankly, Tom gave it credit for. for the Inquisition musical number alone, just how much effort had to have gone into filming that, getting all of the stunts done in the right sequence and the right timing. And then, the jokes, they really did at times, dig into some of the lightness of some of the history and the moments that they're working in, and still be able to make jokes that are timeless in this. And for that, I gave it an 8 total.
So that is a 7 average between the three of us. Let's move to classicness. This is a measure of how well or not something has aged. We have given this traditionally now, over the last roughly season and a half, a baseline of a 6 as the starting point, figuring that we would be able to take points off more readily than to add them on for anything. However, that has not exactly happened in practice. Yet this category still lives in the gray, and as such, we turn to our senior nuance correspondent, Dana.
I'll say it right off the bat. It's at a 6. I gave it a point up for some of the jokes holding up yet after this long, but I gave it a point down for the homophobic aspect or some of the jokes. It just doesn't age well. So I'm right back at the original 6.
I think that this movie, as far as the comedy, has aged pretty poorly in my book. There is a telling thing early on in, I believe it's the first season, maybe even the pilot, of a TV show called Hacks, which is very much about how to write comedy in a modern sense. And they're discussing offensiveness. Is a joke offensive? Is there topics that are out of bounds? And the point that they're trying to make in that show was, as long as it's funny, everything is in bounds. But you have to be clever, you have to be funny. The thing that I think, unfortunately, happens for this movie is that some of the jokes just don't land nearly as well as they might have with some context 40-some years ago. And so, as such, I think it's actually gotten worse in the overall classicness. So I have this at a 2, because whether it's the gay jokes or the over-sexualized jokes or just generally a lot of the things that happen in here, when something ages poorly, it gets also additionally offensive. So it kind of has this weird exponential effect to me. And so I had to take more points off than I probably would have otherwise, because comedies have this additional factor, I guess.
I gave it a 5 overall. I knocked it down for a couple of the problems that we've already talked about on here, but beyond that, I did appreciate that some of the jokes and the humor were of things that are kind of timeless, the political problems that we have and stuff we're still dealing with now, as far as, fuck the poor and all the what you can and can't say in front of important members of society and all that kind of stuff. I do think that is something that we are still dealing with now, and so for that I gave it a little bit back up, despite the fact that I do struggle with certain moments of this movie. So, yeah, 5 total.
So that is a 4.33 average between the three of us. Moving to rewatchability. Insert your own subjective test here, however you'd like. Normally we start with our guest on this one, but because this movie and this director, this filmmaker, has particular reverence for one of my fellow partners this evening, we're going to start with Dad. What is your rewatchability for the movie?
I have a 7.5. It's going to be something I rewatch on a fairly regular basis. It's not going to be at the level of the producer, either of the producers, or definitely not either Young Frankenstein or Blazing Saddles. But I'll give it a 7.5 because it's right outside the cusp. This is the kind of thing I could throw on if I'm going to fall asleep, because I wake up and I'm going to know where the film is. So not a problem for me.
I had a 7. Despite, some of the problems of this, I still find moments that are fun and amusing, specifically some of the historical jokes, but historian. I mean, I'm even gonna take the opportunity, having had to rent this, to catch the last 10 minutes and show my partner the last part of the film again tomorrow night, as he had started it with my dad and I as well. So, kind of get to enjoy that, especially those last scenes, because he heard me laughing hysterically to Jews in space and was very confused. So,
You'll have to forgive me here, Dad, but unfortunately I have this at a 3. I think that the lack of humor, or how poorly it's aged over time, the lack of funniness, the things that I do find funny, I think you could cut up into a YouTube reel and probably be more entertaining than sitting down for the full 90 minutes. But there are just long stretches of this movie that I could cut out or skip past and have no problem whatsoever, especially with the lack of a narrative. It's not like you have to watch every section of the film. So if you have the DVD, I would say just skip around on certain scenes and move past stuff if you really wanted to go about it that way, which I guess doesn't happen as much in the streaming era, where you don't have that chapterized version of things where you can skip around quite like that. Again, why I would say the YouTube cut up is probably more likely, but I don't know if I'm going to have the ability to show this to anybody and have them think, yeah, I need to spend a full 90 minutes rewatching that. So I have that at a 3, which means that it is a 5.83 average between the three of us. For audience score on this one, we had a 78% for Google users and an 81% for Rotten Tomato users, giving us a 7.95. So to repeat the categories, for Legacy, we had a 6.5. Impact and Significance, we had a 5. Novelty, a 7. Classicness, a 4.33. Rewatchability, a 5.83. And audience score, a 7.95, giving us a final total of 36.61, and currently placing it on our list between Live and Let Die and Coal Miner's Daughter for 264 on the list of the 284 currently on the list, so 20 from the bottom. But as always, if you have any commentary for us, good, bad, or otherwise, you can find us on any of our socials at Gmode Podcast. You can write us at our email, greatestaltimemoviepodcast@gmail.com, or find us on our website, RonnieDuncanStudios.com/Gmode Podcast. I didn't have any remaining questions for this one. Did anybody else?
Nope.
Hearing none, I would like to thank our guest for being back with us for her 11th time. And I know you'll be back with us in a couple of weeks for Legally Blonde with our other sister. So 4 Duncans on an episode again. I wonder how that'll... Well, 5 Duncans was a lot back in season 1, and I don't think I'll ever do that again. But is there anything that you'd like to promote? Anything you're working on, or where people can find you?
Well, as I said earlier, still working on that paper. I'm hoping potentially to present at next year's military history conference. I don't know if anybody out there frequents those military history conferences, and but we are party people. So if so, maybe I'll see you then. Otherwise, as always, you can catch me on Instagram at... My handle is @thenomadicarchaeologist, where I have been posting pictures from excavations and sites from my recent trip to Greece.
Sarah's calling in for the cavalry to those military history conferences, so much so that if you bring people with you, they'll be cannon fodder. Moving on. By the way, didn't you two have like a paper you were working on jointly or something?
Yeah, it kind of fell apart.
Yeah.
I have the research done and just never
materialized.
Came into fruition.
It's a dead issue. Okay. Moving on.
I've never seen this research.
I tried to give it to you. You said you didn't have time.
Tom lobs a grenade in the middle of the room.
Yeah.
Final thoughts for the week, Dad.
in preparation and going forward for my show on June 8th.
No. So when this film, when this comes out, that will have already happened.
Well, that's true.
Because this comes out on June 10th. June 8th would have been 2 days ago.
Okay. All right, thoughts for this week. I took your mother to see a film last night. We saw The Sheep Detective.
Oh, I thought you were seeing Mandalorian and Grogu.
No. Apparently, that is getting just skewered.
No.
That's not... I'm hearing that it's not good.
Everybody else that is a fan and a reviewer has reviewed it well. It just doesn't have the numbers. People aren't showing up for it.
Okay. Because the couple of the... wasn't the movie reviewers, but it was a few people involved that wrote a piece on the New York Times saying that it just got it wrong again.
I don't care. The New York Times and film criticism hasn't been very good for a long time.
All right, whatever. So, but no, I saw The Sheep Detective. I enjoyed it. It was fun.
Did Mom say it was stupid?
No, she enjoyed it.
Yeah.
Interesting.
It's different. I mean, so,
she says it was a movie she'd love to take grandkids to. It was cute, as she put it this morning, at least.
Okay. Sure.
I had to explain who half of the people were doing voices for the sheep.
You didn't have to do that. You did that for your own personal satisfaction.
No, I just asked her, and she couldn't remember.
Yes, you did
half
this
of these
for
people.
your own personal satisfaction.
Okay. Anyway, so, but it was a decent film, and I would recommend people going to watch it. It was nice to get out to a theater and sit and among some... I think there was probably about 30 people in the theater last night.
Not bad.
Which, for Wisconsin Rapids on a Tuesday, is not horrible, especially when the weather's really nice.
I'm sorry. The only time people do go to movies in Wisconsin Rapids is $5 movie night on Tuesdays.
Depends on the movie, but yeah.
No, it really doesn't. People are cheap in Wisconsin Rapids.
Well, that's true. That's true. I mean, the highlight of Wisconsin Rapids is we're getting Pizza Ranch because...
Oh, God.
Oh, God.
Yeah, because, of course, it's buffet. But the minute that'll kind of tank, the minute people find out they're charging $18 for the buffet now. And they're going to, oh, my God.
I'm trying to think. What is the most
That's normal out here.
inoffensive, basic type of thing of anything else? That's what Pizza Ranch is. It is so par for the course that it should be its own thing.
I mean, it's Pizza Ranch, and you mention it, and most people go, I really like their chicken. Because, of course, Pizza Ranch. Of course, chicken.
Whatever. I mean, I don't care for their food. It is...
The best part of Pizza Ranch is what they call their cactus pizza, which is the fruit pizza with the frosting. Those are really tasty.
It is fine in the fine by the fines.
Mm-hmm.
It is so mid.
I will happily stick to my authentic Mexican, my Russian dumpling restaurant, and my Japanese noodle place.
All the power to you. It is the left guard of restaurants.
How do you even know what the left guard was?
Whatever.
What the hell are you guys talking about?
American football.
There was a chain of restaurants that was owned in part by Fuzzy
Not what I was
Thurston,
talking about.
But it was called the Left Guard Restaurants.
Okay, well, that's just a coincidence. I had no idea about them, and
Okay.
that was not the point of this subject. I was trying to think of, like, the most inoffensive position to play.
Okay.
It's the power forward of restaurants. Whatever. Moving on. As for me, where we sit in reality, the initial, let's say, choice select reviews for Disclosure Day came out today, and they were rather glowing, as you would expect them to be. But when this episode will be released in about 2 weeks from where we're recording, it will be coming out in a few days, and I'm looking forward to that. Another Steven Spielberg film. Anytime he allows us some of his talents yet, I'll be happy to watch. There's a couple of other films left this month that I am waiting to see, but we have a 9-day baseball road trip coming up between the two of us that I'm looking forward to and taking some time off, even if I'm not necessarily looking forward to spending 6, 7, 8, 9 hours in the car on a given day. And that's not just like in the car with you or anything, but just simply spending that much time in the car anymore. You know, in my 20s, when I drive across the country for 20 straight hours, that wasn't a thing. But now, in my mid-30s...
You're old.
Yeah. Even doing the 5.5 hours to and from St. Louis last week was getting a little old after, like, I finished my second of 3 books that I got through, so...
Promise to not eat too many beans.
I mean, if you do, I will still beat you at that competition.
Dad, I will pay for the extra beans just so you fumigate Tom like Chicago.
That was a classic error by Aunt Pam. One time, she picked me up from Northland when I was a freshman in high school and decided that she wanted to have a farting contest the whole hour ride home, so we went to Taco John's, and I beat her soundly.
Well, it was Taco John's. I mean, yeah.
Yeah. Well, it really wouldn't have made much difference what it was. Nobody can rip it better than I can. But we'll leave it at that for the week. Thank you for listening. I do wish we could chat longer, but I'm having an old friend for dinner. Next week for our 316th episode, we discuss Ace in the Hole from 1951, celebrating its 75th anniversary. Written and directed by Billy Wilder with Lesser Samuels and Walter Newman. Cinematography by Charles Lang. Music by Hugo Friedhofer. Editing by Doan Harrison and Arthur P. Schmidt. Starring Kirk Douglas, Jan Sterling, Robert Arthur, and Porter Hall. You won't want to miss that one, so watch ahead of the show by searching the Real Good app to find where it's streaming for you. That's REELGOOD. Please like, follow, rate, and review, or whatever on whichever platform you have so that more can join in at our fun. You can also email the show at RonnieDuncanStudios.com or greatestalltimemoviepodcast@gmail.com, or find us on YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, Letterboxd, or TikTok at the handle @GeekPodcast. Greatest Movie of All Time is a production of Ronnie Duncan Studios. Our show is mixed, edited, and written by Thomas Duncan. Our music is thanks to Purple Planet Music. Our distributor is Captivate FM. Our technical provider is Riverside FM.